I was out of state for the past couple of days, so everything coming out on Sunday is going to be 2 chapters this week. So let's get started. And for One Piece this week, we are starting off with chapter 1187, and this chapter picks up immediately after Luffy's massive punch on Emu. It escalates with Loki fighting for survival, the Straw Hats trying to free Gunko from unbreakable ice, and the Holy Knights kidnapping kids while focusing on Luffy versus Emu, side battles, and major character teases without big flashbacks. Now moving on to the reduced pacing and structure section, Oda balances the 3 sections of Luffy, Emu, and Loki, Zoro, Sanji, and the others, and the comedy with the other Straw Hats is thanks to the very nature of the manga and the excellent character interaction work over these last 100 chapters to reach this point. The structure follows classic One Piece climax flow, containing action, character moments, more action, and killer endings. This one perfectly on Luffy's declaration for a strong 9 out of 10 pacing. Next, we will start with the condensed character components for the chapter 1187, starting with Luffy, where we see that it looks like he lands a Conqueror's Haki-infused punch on Emu. He shows captaincy by telling Loki to rest, cleverly redirects Emu's attack, and rejects being called Joy Boy, declaring himself simply Luffy, the future king of pirates, and we see Gear 5 is most likely incoming. Next, we'll move on to the next point, Loki, who, despite being badly injured and wheezing, the prideful Loki keeps fighting and indirectly helps free Gunko, proving his commitment. Next point, character-wise, for this chapter would be Emu, and Emu showcases terrifying new powers with talking black omen flames that mark targets and guide attacks, plus the massive black fire stigma blade. This confirms Emu is an ancient demonic level threat. Next, we'll move on to Sanji for 1187. Sanji ignores the female-looking opponent due to chivalry and targets killing him directly to save the kids, while a Gabon flashback reveals his Conqueror's Haki potential hampered by masochistic instability and pride. Gabon tells him he must become a king himself for Luffy to become king of the pirates, setting up Sanji's awakening in the next few chapters more likely. Next point, we'll look at Zoro, who confidently battles Summers and reassures him that Sanji has his fight covered. Next, we'll move on to Ragnar and the Straw Hats for the chapter. Ragnar accidentally melts the ice while panicking in squirrel form, freeing Gunko. The Straw Hats share fun, classic comedy banter during the ice-freeing attempt. Moving on to the story progression and lore components for 1187, the Elbaf climax intensifies with Luffy fully engaging Emu, Zoro and Sanji countering the kidnappings, and everything converging. Lore reveals include Emu's demonic flame and stigma powers, an ancient 800-year historical cycle, Sanji's Haki potentially tied to his trauma, Killingham's defeat weakness, and the sun versus darkness framing of Luffy versus Emu. Now onto my final thoughts for 1187. This is a strong mid-climax chapter that advances every thread with great action, deep character moments, especially Luffy's rejection and Sanji's setup, and scary Emu powers. It earns a 9 out of 10 for excellent pacing, character work, and setup for bigger fights ahead in the endgame of Elbaf arc and beyond. Now moving on to the pacing and structure of the chapter for 1188, the most recent chapter. This is a non-stop, high-speed action chapter with no side plots or detours, continuing directly from the previous one. It follows the classic Oda structure of transformation, flashy exchanges, lore beats, and a brutal finishing move, delivering tight, intense pacing that serves only the fight and its emotional and lore payoffs. Moving to the character components for 1188, which are definitely shorter than the previous, starting with Luffy, who remains his goofy, free-spirited self, fully embracing Nika's imagination in powerful new genie form, while still getting humbled, reinforcing his growth potential. Next, we'll move on to Emu, who is the next point. He appears as a composed, overwhelming, superior final boss with ancient history tied to Joy Boy, showing arrogance and deep personal stakes. Finally, we'll look at the Straw Hats' bonds as the final point, which stays highlighted in the color spread, and some extra banter in this chapter as well as the previous chapter, and Loki's earlier defeat underscores Emu's threat level, kind of thinking that we might anticipate Luffy may have done better, but he definitely didn't. Moving to the story progression and lore components for the chapter of 1188. The chapter pushes the Elbaf arc climax forward by pitting Luffy directly against the world government's true leader, raising massive stakes with his severe injury and setting up potential power-ups or ally interventions. Key lore drops in the chapter include the first visual of Joy Boy in Emu's memories, whose smile parallels Luffy's, confirmation of Emu's Void Sentry connection, the reality warping Void Sword, and emphasis that Luffy's current Gear 5 is not yet at Joy Boy's level. Moving on to my final thoughts on chapter 1188, it's an absolute hell of a hype chapter full of spectacle, callbacks like the crocodile parallel at the end, and meaningful lore that is very exciting. Luffy's easy loss moment builds perfect tension for comebacks and future arcs, earning a 9.5 out of 10 rating for me, with anticipation heightened by the next week break. How will Luffy be okay after seeing this devastation? We will find out in the next One Piece chapter. I'll talk to you in the next video. Alright, see ya.